This is a story about a monster that killed 350 people. Because of the unimaginable cruelty with which he dealt with his victims. Even the mafia and drug cartels joined in the search for him. His name is listed in the Guinness Book of Records, and this record has not been broken to this day. But his biography is also a shining example of that. How an unhappy childhood can turn an ordinary child into the most brutal serial killer. Our days. Meet Pedro Alonso Lopez. Lopez was born in 1948 in the Colombian town of Santa Isabel. Life didn't go well from the very first seconds. His mother was a prostitute who had already given birth to 12 children. And his father was a politician who liked to use escort services. However, the father did not have time to play any role in the fate of the future maniac. Soon after his son's birth. At age 8, the boy's life changed dramatically. His mother found him in bed with his own sister. After which she brutally beat him and kicked him out of the house forever. As a result, the 8-year-old child ended up on the street, forced to look for food and shelter in order to survive. One day, an adult man approached him, offering food and shelter. Lopez immediately agreed. And this decision became one of the first mistakes, which led the child on the path to becoming a serial killer. Alas, the stranger turned out to be not a kind person at all, who couldn't pass by a starving child. He took the boy to an abandoned building, where he sexually abused him for several months in a row. Sometimes he brought his friends, who also harmed the child. At one point, Lopez managed to escape, and he moved to the capital of Colombia. At first, the boy tried to get food from garbage dumps, but he was unable to feed himself in this way. Later, he began to beg for alms, and this bore fruit. A married couple from the USA noticed the child and took pity on him, taking him into their home. They also placed the boy in a school for orphans. Unfortunately, when he was 12 years old, he was seduced by one of his teachers. The boy decided to run away once again, taking with him the money from the school cash register. Over the next 6 years, he gradually immersed himself in the criminal world. First petty thefts, then car thefts. During this time, the young man became part of the criminal world. At 18, he decided to take advantage of his new connections. Turned out to be such a serious crime. As a result, the judge took pity and sentenced him to 8 years in prison. But Lopez was unlucky there too. After learning of his past, his cellmates abused him. This time, Lopo's revenge was immediate. He ambushed 4 rapists in the toilet. He killed 3 of them and disabled the 4th. For this, 2 years were added to his sentence, but more. No prisoner dared to bother him. After spending 10 years in prison, Lopez's psyche finally broke down. Throughout this time, he was fixated on his crippled fate and the reasons that made him so unhappy. As a result, he decided that the blame lay with his mother. Over time, hatred towards her grew into hostility towards all women, and this resulted in one of the most horrific killing sprees in history. After leaving prison, he moved to Peru, where he started killing and raping girls he acted so aggressively on. That soon fell into the hands of the inhabitants of one of the Indian settlements. They beat him half to death, after which they buried him up to his neck in the sand. The police who arrived at the scene did not believe the locals, but still deported Lopez to Ecuador, because he did not have Peruvian citizenship. There he immediately returned to his old ways and continued to kill women. Soon, the mass disappearances of girls attracted the attention of the police. They decided that they were being kidnapped to be sold into slavery. Unfortunately, in Latin America this problem is still relevant today, not to mention those years. The police would have continued to adhere to this version, but the maniac was unlucky again. The flood brought the bodies he had buried to the surface and everyone realized the terrible truth. There is a serial killer on the streets. Women disappeared by the dozens, and soon young people joined them. Girls, the youngest of whom was only 7 years old. In a few hours, Lope was able to rape and kill 3 victims. At this stage, the mafia and cartels joined the search for the sadist. Even they were shocked by what was happening and wanted to finish off the maniac, who encroached on Ecuadorian girls. The situation escalated so much that almost every police officer was involved in searching for the looter. One day he lost his guard. While trying to kidnap another girl, she contacted the police and the maniac was quickly caught. Unfortunately for the investigation, they had no evidence linking the Muliks to the murder. So they decided to resort to trickery. In the cell of the prisoner, where he was placed during the investigation, they placed a cellmate undercover. His task was to gain the maniac's trust and extract a confession. Surprisingly, this simple maneuver worked very quickly. Just a few days later, Lopez told his new friend, who killed more than 300 women in Colombia, Ecuador and Peru. He also detailed the murders, which shocked the police. Lopez's tactics were simple. He would find a girl and offer her a gift. After this, he would take the victim to some abandoned house, where he subjected to violence for a long time and later killed. To get the most out of pleasure, the sadist deprived them of life exclusively during the day, to clearly see the horror in their eyes. Sometimes he also mocked the villages, after which he buried them in a common grave. When police discovered their cellmate trick, Lopez realized that he couldn't get away with it and didn't hide anything. Moreover, the idea of becoming famous throughout the country attracted the maniac. During interrogation, he pointed out one to the police, from the graves where shocked detectives discovered the bodies of 53 girls. From that moment on, everyone understood. In front of them is the most terrifying serial killer in Latin America, and maybe the whole world. He himself said directly that he would continue to kill even after prison, because for him it is an incomparable pleasure. During interrogation, he was also asked why from adult women. He moved on to the little girls, to which the maniac said, "I want to be their first and last man." Taking all this into account, he was immediately assigned a psychological examination, as a result of which Lopez was declared completely sane. However, the conclusion stated that the maniac was characterized by a strong hatred towards all people. However, this moment is unlikely to surprise anyone, given his biography. Ultimately, the court was able to bring charges in the murder and rape of 110 girls in Ecuador, because the other victims were outside their jurisdiction. And here the most interesting part begins. The maximum prison term provided for by the country's legislation is 20 years. That's how much Lopez received, despite his promise to kill after his release. At this point, the story gets even more confusing. Different sources give their own versions of what happened to Lopez. There is no official confirmation of any of them. First version: After 16 years in prison, he was secretly transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Colombia, where he spent the remaining 4 years and was released. Such generosity of the system. Justice was allegedly linked to exemplary behavior, maniac and voluntary cooperation with the investigation. The second version. According to this version, a maniac. Nevertheless, he was sentenced to death by firing squad in another country. If we proceed from this version, the authorities should have issued an official confirmation. But this has not happened yet. The third version. The BBC conducted its investigation and came to the conclusion that Lopez was released from prison in 1998 and extradited to Colombia. After this, he allegedly disappeared and they still can't find him to this day. In 2006, Lopez was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records as the most prolific killer. Soon its management received many complaints from people who considered the maniac's achievement to be direct propaganda for murder. Others noted that Lopez is not a record holder at all. They cited the example of Tugabi of the Temple, which, according to unconfirmed reports, killed about 900 people in India. After all these claims, it was decided to annul the serial killer's record. Most likely, Lopez is still alive, but whether he continues to kill is unknown. He would be 72 years old by now, so he could well retire. Now that you know the story of Pedro Lopez, you probably have mixed feelings. On the one hand, he was a ruthless maniac who killed hundreds of people, no matter what led him to this path. It is simply impossible to seek justification for what was done. But it's worth looking at Lopez's biography. But you wonder if he would have become a monster. If his childhood had been different, the boy would never have had a loving family. His mother sold her body for money for food, and throughout his growing up years he repeatedly became a victim of sadists. His story is a dead end in the viewer's mind, as there is no single correct answer. Cruelty begot cruelty, and this is the problem of our world as a whole. And not a single maniac.